weight, maintain it with little to no effort, and never diet again? If you just said yes, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to The Perfect Gauge. I'm your host, Caroline Trickey, dietitian and eating psychology coach, and I'm so glad you've joined me. And today I'm discussing that when it comes to weight loss, it's not about the food, but it's not about the food. Now, I know that's a bit meta, hey, but I'm going to do my best to try and explain what I mean by this. So years ago, I struggled with my weight. I was in my 20s and running a cafe and catering business where I'd be sampling food all day long. I'd go home, eat dinner, regardless of whether I was hungry or not, then flop on the couch and eat, usually ice cream, while watching TV to help me unwind from what was a pretty hectic day. And I loved going out on the weekend to restaurants with friends and indulging. Then when I could feel I'd put on some weight, I'd restrict my intake in some way, or I'd increase my exercise, or I'd often do both. My weight yo-yoed, my thoughts became preoccupied with food and my weight. I was so afraid of losing grip, gaining and continuing to gain weight. At the same time, I felt conflicted. Despite running a food-focused business and loving food, it was also a source of my self-loathing and discomfort. This carried on for years into my early, then mid-30s. Then my ex-husband left and I started seeing a counsellor. My ex and I had been fighting for the past few months, mostly about how much time and energy I spent on and at work. But it still came as a shock, especially since I'd been putting together an exit strategy to get out of the cafe. Before my ex-husband left, I'd booked an appointment with a marriage counsellor but couldn't get in for about 6 weeks. So when the appointment came around, he had already left. Despite knowing he wasn't coming back, I decided to go on my own to help me work out what had gone wrong. It was the best decision I ever made. Over the course of the next year I spent at counselling, I learned about the mind, mindsets, beliefs, and how to improve my self-talk. I noticed that not only had my joy and zest for life started returning, but my eating behaviour dramatically changed. I felt lighter, emotionally and psychologically lighter. I changed how I thought about food and my body and found my ideal weight. That's when I realised that what I'd been doing to, quote, fix the food thing was never going to work. Over the following years, I replaced stuffing my face with food with stuffing my mind with everything I could. I left the cafe and finished my training to become a dietitian. I then studied health coaching, eating psychology, hypnotherapy, and life coaching. I read books on the brain and the power of the mind. I listened to TED Talks, podcasts, and anything else I could get my hands on. I lapped up all of this amazing information hungrily. I practically binged on it. I slowly started to apply what I'd learned with clients. After spending hundreds, if not thousands of hours learning, understanding, and mastering the craft of how our minds work, I started to realize something. It's not about the food. It was never about the food. That's why no amount of willpower, self-control, or self-discipline will ever give you the body or freedom you desire. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that what you eat isn't important, but the reason most approaches fail is that they have you focus almost entirely on the food. After all, it's pretty easy to just hand you a meal plan telling you when, what, and how much you're allowed to eat. But you already know what to eat, right? Thing is, you're not able to do what you know. It's not about the food, but it's not about the food. So many women who overeat and feel out of control around food believe that food must be the problem. This is one of the biggest food myths there is. If you struggle with food, focusing more on the food isn't the solution. Yet, still when someone wants to lose weight, what do? They focus on food, what to eat, what not to eat. They go searching for diet plans or diet meal delivery services. They may even get sent to see a dietitian to talk to them about what to eat. Far too many people still look to fad diets or weight loss clubs as a solution. They go on plans that restrict specific foods while forcing them to eat others, or obsess over counting calories and scoring points. Some programs these days even get you to photograph everything you eat. Everything. How monotonous. When your focus is solely on the food, you're missing the elephant in the room. You're not addressing the actual problem. The reason most people don't succeed at weight loss is not because they don't know what to eat. It's because they don't address why they're eating. So losing weight is not about the food, because food just sits there, minding its own business. It never forces you to eat it. You're choosing what, when, and how much to eat always. But it is about the food, because it's about how food is being used. How food is being used in all sorts of ways other than to manage hunger. When you eat when you're not hungry, you are using food as a tool to change how you feel, to alter your emotions. You use food whereas others may use alcohol, drugs, shopping, gambling, sex, or work. And when you're doing this, it's not what you're eating that's important. It's what you're wanting that food to do for you. When you don't see this, when you don't see what's actually going on, food gets the blame. And you think you just like food too much. You think you love food, and that's why you're wanting to eat too much. And I hear this from my clients all the time. They'll tell me, I struggle with my weight because I just love food. Or losing weight would be so much easier if I didn't love food so much. I actually disagree. I believe that genuinely loving food is the key to eating well and achieving weight loss. Because when you truly love something, you give it your undivided attention. You savor each moment with it and don't allow yourself to be distracted from it. When you love food, you show respect by presenting it beautifully on a plate and treating it with care. You buy the best quality you can afford because you value and can tell the difference. When you love food, truly love food, you pay close attention to it, relish every bite, and take the time to fully appreciate each mouthful. When you love food, you eat consciously, and when you indulge, you know where the tipping point is. That's the point at which indulging goes from, that was delicious, to, oh my God, that was delicious, but I ate way too much. But when you're eating to change how you feel, you're not paying attention to the food. You're scoffing it down quickly, frantically. You're not consciously aware of what you're eating and how much you're eating. In fact, you're often not aware of how much you've eaten until you've eaten too much. Eating too much doesn't feel good. Actually, it's more than not feeling good. It's incredibly uncomfortable. You feel tired, bloated, and puffy. You can even be in pain. You get angry, fed up, and frustrated with yourself. And this, of course, takes any pleasure away from what you just ate. That's not love, that's suffering. So the issue isn't what you're eating. It's why you're eating. And when I say that, I'm not saying it in a finger-pointy, blamey kind of way. What I'm wanting is for you to get curious, to see this from a different perspective. The number one reason people eat when they aren't hungry, and I see this every day with my clients, is to cover up an unpleasant emotion or fill an emotional hole. So let's say you're feeling tired, bored, miserable, fed up, frustrated, angry, annoyed, stressed, or overwhelmed, and you eat. That has got nothing to do with the food in the moment. that is coming from an emotional driver, and that emotional drive has got something to do with some aspect of your world, some aspect of your life. Basically, you're turning to food to make you feel better, to help you tolerate things. Now, that's a lot to expect from food, but we all do it, even me, from time to time, that is. And we end up stuck in the conundrum. We try our hardest not to eat the food using abstinence, willpower, self-control, using self-discipline. We try our best not to buy it or have it in the house, but that's never actually going to provide a permanent solution, as you're focused entirely on the food because you think food is the issue. Emotional eating is not an isolated thing that's happening to you. It's connected to the rest of your world, to the rest of your life. It's connected to everything else. Now, I'm not wanting to freak you out. I just want you to see that if you've been focusing solely on the food up until now and it hasn't been working, why it's not really about fixing the food stuff. It's about looking at why you are wanting to eat what you do and when you do. If you continue to just focus solely on the food with meal plans, limiting, cutting out, weighing, measuring, trying to use willpower and self-control, it's only going to create a very strained relationship with food and eating. Yet you need food and you need to eat in order to stay alive and thrive. So I'm hoping right now this makes sense to you, that when you focus only on the food and see that as your issue, you're missing what's actually going on. You'll never understand why you're eating. It's likely you'll struggle to see this though, because you eat, then get caught up in the frustrations of your behavior. You end up buried under layers of shame or guilt, or you tell yourself, okay, that's done, I won't do it again, until you do, because using food to make yourself feel better is what you know. When I worked in bariatric surgery, people would pay a lot of money to have 70 to 80% of their stomach removed to stop them eating so much. Or they'd have their tummy made smaller and part of their intestines bypassed so they would only absorb a small amount of what they ate. People pay a lot of money to undergo these procedures, often taking out loans to do so, having to follow strict dieting regimes before and straight after surgery, taking time off work to have the surgery and recover from the surgery, not to mention the surgery itself. Then as many as 50% of people who undergo these procedures gain back the weight they lost. So it's not about the food, because if it was, gastric surgery would work. It's not about the food, but it's not about the food. It's how you use food. It's what you're wanting food to do for you. You have to look deeper to the motivation for turning to food, and then from that place, create something new. So now I want to change direction slightly and ask you what you learned about feelings, what you learned about emotions when you were growing up. So I want you to just take a few seconds to think about what you learned. Do you recall learning anything at all about emotions? When I ask my clients this question, the most common response is nothing. Or they were told to stop crying. Good girls don't cry. You're being too emotional. Suck it up and get on with things. I remember being told often, stop crying or I'll really give you something to cry about. Basically, none of us were taught why we have emotions and that they're a normal part of being human. Instead, we're told to push them down and not pay attention to them. And we start to think that when we feel something, we think they're bad or that something's gone wrong, or that there is something bad or wrong with us. So we start using food to swallow them down, help push them down, and often it takes a large amount of food to push down some of those heavier feelings. And let's face it, eating works. It makes us feel good. It helps distract us from the pain of the emotion. It tastes good. Well, hopefully you're not eating it too fast so you can't taste it. And it provides the pleasure you're seeking, a much more pleasant emotion. So your coping mechanism becomes heading to the fridge or pantry and eating whatever you can find. And when you do this for long enough, years, potentially decades, it becomes wired into your brain as just what you do. Feel bad, eat food, feel better. Feel bad, eat food, feel better, on repeat. When my life was a shit show, I used food to make me feel better because that's all I knew to do. I learned as a child that when I felt uncomfortable, when I felt like something was wrong, I could eat and it would suddenly make things so much better. So for many years, instead of fixing what sucked, I ate, then spent my time trying to fix this second problem I'd created with food, partly because I believed the actual problem couldn't be fixed and I felt stuck. When I ate this way, I gave all my power to the food and thought it was the food that was making me miserable, until I hit rock bottom and started to make changes to my life. I started solving the actual problem I felt so shitty about, and not only did I resolve the food issue, it made the rest of my life so much better as well. Certain emotions like stress, anger, frustration, lonely, feeling upset, lonely, isolated, or down are unpleasant. They feel uncomfortable, but they're there for a reason. If you're trying to ignore them, if you're trying to stuff them down with food to make them go away, you won't access the opportunity they're giving you, which is to wake up to a part of your life you're not happy with, a part of your life that sucks, and you really need to do something about it if you want to live a full and content life and stop overeating. Because until you do, those emotions aren't going anywhere. Okay, so that's what I have for you today. It's not about the food, but it's not about the food. You're using food to change how you feel. And then, if you'd like help to unravel what's going on, get in touch. There's a link in the show notes. Then join me next week when I discuss how to stop getting in your own way. Have a great week, and I'll speak with you then. Oh, and just quickly before you go, I've just launched a 5-day Eating Consciously free challenge on my website that can help you become a more conscious eater. And best of all, it's free. Go to carolinetrickey.com, that's tricky with an EY, to sign up.